Black woman denied flight on her own private jet. Pilot fired instantly when he learns the truth. A woman steps into the luxurious world of private jets, her success evident in every detail. But the pilot, blinded by his assumptions, decides she doesn't belong. His condescending remarks and refusal to fly her set the stage for a confrontation he never saw coming. By the end of this flight, his career and his understanding of respect will take a nosedive. What happens when prejudice meets power? This is a story of resilience, justice, and a lesson delivered at 30,000 feet. Stay tuned. You won't want to miss a single twist. Before we begin, where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments. If you love inspiring stories of resilience and justice, make sure to hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe for more incredible tales. Your support helps us share these impactful stories with even more people. Now let's get into it. The private jet terminal was alive with quiet luxury. Polished marble floors reflected the soft glow of pendant lights, and the faint hum of engines on the tarmac filled the air. Executives in tailored suits and socialites with designer luggage moved through the space with an effortless air of importance. Amid the elegance, Kayla Lawson walked in, her presence commanding attention without a single word. Dressed in a simple yet striking navy blazer and wide-legged trousers, Kayla exuded confidence. Her natural curls framed her face, and her almond-shaped eyes were sharp yet warm. She carried no flashy accessories, just a sleek leather carry-on and a tablet in hand. For Kayla, subtlety was her power. Her success didn't need loud announcements. She approached the check-in desk, where a young woman with a polished uniform and an eager smile greeted her. "Good morning, ma'am. May I assist you?" the woman asked, her voice pleasant and professional. "Yes, thank you," Kayla replied, her tone measured. "I'm here for the Lawson flight to Geneva." The woman's eyes flicked to her screen. "Of course, Miss Lawson. Everything is in order. Your jet is being prepared, and the captain will meet you shortly." Kayla gave a small nod and stepped aside, letting her gaze wander over the terminal. Her flight was crucial, not just for her, but for the team awaiting her arrival overseas. This meeting could solidify a partnership that would expand her luxury goods company into Europe, a move she'd worked tirelessly for. She didn't have to wait long. From across the terminal, a man in a crisp pilot's uniform approached. His shoulders were broad, his steps confident, but his expression was guarded. Captain Mark Baker was the image of professionalism at first glance, but something in his eyes betrayed him, a flicker of disdain, subtle but unmistakable. Kayla turned as he reached her. "Captain Baker, I presume?" she said, extending a hand. Mark glanced at her hand briefly before clasping it. His grip was firm, bordering on dismissive. "Miss Lawson, I take it?" His voice carried a veneer of politeness, but the way he scanned her from head to toe suggested otherwise. Kayla caught it immediately, the narrowing of his eyes, the slight curl at the corner of his mouth. She had seen this look before. "That's correct," Kayla replied, her tone unwavering. She didn't miss a beat. "I trust everything is ready for our departure?" Mark hesitated, glancing at the check-in clerk as if to confirm her words. Yes, though I must say, we don't often see private clients such as yourself." The words hung in the air, each syllable dripping with implication. Kayla raised an eyebrow. "Wow, clients such as myself?" she repeated, her voice calm but laced with an edge. Mark shrugged, a smirk playing on his lips. "You know, it's just uncommon. Most of our private jet owners are, well, they're a little different." Kayla held his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Different how?" "Well, no offense, but people in this space usually have a certain background," Mark said, avoiding her eyes. "Now, it's not typical to see someone." He trailed off, but the meaning was clear. The check-in clerk froze, her polite smile faltering as the tension thickened. Kayla remained composed, but a flicker of something colder passed through her eyes. "I see," she said finally. "And you based that observation on what exactly?" Mark shifted on his feet, realizing too late that he had stepped into dangerous territory. "Oh, I didn't mean anything by it. It's just, well, I wasn't expecting the jet owner to be present." Kayla crossed her arms. "Captain Baker, let's be clear. I am not only present, but I am also the sole owner of this aircraft. Now, if there's an issue, I suggest you state it plainly." Mark's smirk vanished, replaced by a tight-lipped expression. "No issue," he muttered, though his tone suggested otherwise. I'll get the pre-flight checks done. As he turned to walk away, Kayla's voice stopped him. Captain. He paused, glancing back. Be sure you're fully prepared, she said evenly. I have no tolerance for unprofessionalism. Her words hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown. Mark's jaw tightened, but he nodded stiffly and walked away. Kayla exhaled softly, her grip tightening on her carry-on. This wasn't the first time her presence had been questioned, and she doubted it would be the last. But today, of all days, she wouldn't let ignorance and prejudice derail her plans. She glanced at her watch. The jet would be ready soon, and with it, another battle would unfold, one she was determined to win. Kayla made her way to the private lounge, her heels clicking against the pristine marble floors with deliberate precision. The space was an oasis of tranquility, designed to cater to the ultra-wealthy who valued discretion above all else. Plush leather seating, subtle ambient lighting, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee created an air of exclusivity. But today, for Kayla, the luxurious surroundings felt like a veneer over something much uglier. Settling into a chair by the window, she placed her carry-on beside her and took out her tablet. As her finger hovered over the screen, reviewing the final presentation for her meeting in Geneva, her mind remained partially tethered to the unsettling encounter with Captain Baker. Her career had taught her how to spot prejudice the moment it reared its head. It wasn't always loud or overt. It didn't have to be. Sometimes it hid in condescending glances, in loaded comments disguised as politeness, or in the hesitation before a handshake. Mark Baker had been no different. His subtle derision spoke volumes, and Kayla knew it was only the beginning. The attendant who had greeted her earlier approached quietly, her smile still intact, but her demeanor tinged with unease. Miss Lawson, she said softly, her hands clasped in front of her. Can I offer you anything while you wait? Coffee, tea, perhaps a glass of water? Kayla looked up from her tablet, her expression softening as she registered the young woman's nervousness. A coffee would be lovely, thank you, she replied, her voice gentle. The attendant nodded and turned to leave, but Kayla called out, Excuse me, what's your name? The woman stopped, a little startled, then smiled shyly. It's Lisa, ma'am. Thank you, Lisa, Kayla said, her tone warm. I appreciate your professionalism. Lisa's face lit up, her shoulders visibly relaxing. Of course, ma'am. I'll bring your coffee right away. As Lisa disappeared into the adjoining kitchenette, Kayla's gaze drifted back to the tarmac outside the window. The jet was a sleek marvel of engineering, its metallic exterior gleaming in the sunlight. It was hers, every inch, every detail, a testament to her hard work and determination. She had poured years into building her company from the ground up, fighting through obstacles and skepticism to stand where she did today, and yet, here she was, still needing to prove her place. Her phone buzzed on the table, interrupting her thoughts. She picked it up to see the name Robert Stone flashing on the screen. A faint smile tugged at her lips as she answered. Robert, she greeted him. I assume you're calling with good news. Robert's deep, jovial voice came through the line. Always, Kayla. Just wanted to confirm that everything's in place for the Geneva meeting. The partners are eager to see what you have to offer. They won't be disappointed, Kayla said confidently, though a shadow of irritation crossed her mind as she thought of Mark Baker. But I may have to handle a small complication before we take off. There was a brief pause on Robert's end. Complication? He asked, his tone shifting to one of concern. What kind of complication? Kayla leaned back in her chair, her gaze fixed on the jet outside. Let's just say our captain has some preconceived notions about who belongs in this terminal. Robert sighed heavily. Do you want me to handle it? No, Kayla said firmly. I can manage, but I may need you to back me up if it escalates. Always, Robert replied without hesitation. Just say the word. Thank you, Robert, Kayla said, her voice softening. I'll keep you updated. After ending the call, she placed her phone down and stared out at the jet again. The aircraft, an embodiment of her achievements, suddenly felt like a battleground, but Kayla wasn't one to shy away from a fight, especially not when it came to defending her place in a world that often underestimated her. Lisa returned moments later, carefully balancing a tray with a steaming cup of coffee and a small dish of sugar cubes. Here you go, ma'am, she said, setting it down on the table with practiced grace. Thank you, Lisa, Kayla said, offering her a small smile. As Lisa turned to leave, Kayla added, And Lisa? Yes, ma'am, she replied, glancing back. If there's ever a situation where someone questions your worth or your place, don't let them intimidate you, understand? Lisa blinked, a mix of surprise and gratitude flashing across her face. I will, ma'am. Thank you. Kayla watched her leave, her words lingering in the air. She took a sip of her coffee, letting its warmth steady her resolve. Mark Baker's attitude wasn't just about her. It was a reflection of a much larger issue, one she had encountered time and again. But today, she wouldn't let it go unanswered. Minutes later, a commotion at the far end of the lounge drew her attention. Mark had returned, his expression stern as he spoke to another uniformed staff member. Kayla couldn't hear their words, but the tension was palpable. The staff member looked uneasy, nodding hurriedly as Mark gestured toward the jet. Kayla placed her cup down and stood, smoothing the fabric of her blazer. It was time to confront the storm head-on. She walked toward Mark with measured steps, her every movement deliberate and composed. As she approached, Mark turned, his expression darkening when he saw her. "Miss Lawson," he said, his tone clipped. "I was just making final preparations for the flight." Kayla tilted her head slightly, studying him with a calm intensity. "I see. And do these preparations include questioning my authority as the owner of this aircraft?" Mark stiffened, his jaw tightening. "I don't know what you mean." Kayla stepped closer, her voice dropping to a level that demanded attention. "Oh, I think you do, Captain Baker. And I suggest you think carefully about your next words, because how you proceed will determine whether or not you're still employed by the time this jet leaves the tarmac." For the first time, Mark faltered, the confidence he had worn like armor cracked, and uncertainty seeped through. Kayla held his gaze, unflinching. The battle had begun, and she had no intention of losing. Mark stood frozen for a moment, his expression shifting between indignation and unease. The smooth confidence he had carried earlier now appeared brittle under the weight of Kayla's words. Behind him, the other staff member, likely another crew member, fidgeted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between the two figures. Kayla maintained her stance, unwavering. Her voice had been calm, even, but it carried an authority that left no room for negotiation. She had dealt with men like Mark before, those who mistook privilege for power and entitlement for competence. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, until Mark finally spoke. "With all due respect, Miss Lawson," he began, his tone laced with barely concealed irritation. "I'm simply doing my job. Ensuring the safety and integrity of this flight is my top priority." And Kayla raised a hand, cutting him off mid-sentence. "Captain Baker, I respect the importance of your role, but let's not pretend this is about safety or integrity. This is about your inability to accept that someone like me owns this jet." Mark opened his mouth to protest, but Kayla continued, her voice firm yet controlled. "I've provided the necessary documentation, and my presence here is fully authorized. If you had any legitimate concerns, you would have addressed them professionally, not through dismissive remarks and veiled insults." The other staff member took a half step back, clearly uncomfortable being caught in the crossfire. Mark's face reddened, his composure slipping further. "I don't appreciate being accused of something I didn't do," he said, his voice rising slightly. "I treat all my clients with respect." Kayla arched an eyebrow, her lips curving into a faint, incredulous smile. "Respect? Is that what you call questioning my ownership, refusing to believe I belong here, and making condescending comments about my background, Captain? If this is your version of respect, I'd hate to see what the alternative looks like." Her words hit like a hammer, and Mark's flush deepened. He glanced around as if searching for an ally, but the terminal staff kept their distance, their eyes averted. The private lounge had grown quieter, the earlier hum of activity now muted as people took notice of the escalating tension. "I'm just following protocol," Mark muttered, his voice defensive now. "There's no need to make this personal." Kayla stepped closer, closing the gap between them. Her presence was magnetic, her calmness unnerving. "Oh, but it is personal, Captain. It became personal the moment you decided I didn't fit into your preconceived notions of who should own a private jet. And let me be clear, I won't tolerate being treated as less than anyone else here. Not by you, not by anyone." Mark's gaze faltered, and for a brief moment, the bravado he had clung to so tightly seemed to waver, but he quickly masked it, straightening his shoulders and adopting a more formal tone. "Miss Lawson, I assure you, this has all been a misunderstanding. I'll see to it that your flight proceeds smoothly. Kayla regarded him for a long moment, her sharp eyes searching his face. She could see the cracks in his facade, the forced politeness that barely concealed his resentment. But this wasn't over, not yet. I'll hold you to that, she said finally, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. But understand this, I'll be reporting this incident to your superiors. If you think you can dismiss this as a misunderstanding, you're sorely mistaken. Mark's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. Understood. Kayla turned on her heel and walked back toward the lounge seating, her stride measured and purposeful. She didn't need to look back to know that every eye in the room was on her. She had made her point, but the tension still simmered beneath the surface, unresolved. Kayla returned to her seat and picked up her tablet, though her focus had shifted entirely. Her mind raced, replaying the encounter with Mark and analyzing every detail. The pilot's hostility wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a broader issue, one that Kayla had encountered too many times before. As she sipped her now lukewarm coffee, her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Robert. Robert, everything okay? Want me to step in? Kayla smiled faintly at the message, appreciating his support. She quickly typed a reply. Kayla, I've handled it for now, but keep your phone close. I may need you to intervene if this escalates. Robert's response was immediate. Robert, always. Call me if you need backup. Kayla placed her phone down and exhaled deeply, centering herself. She couldn't afford to let Mark's behavior distract her from the bigger picture. The deal in Geneva was a milestone for her company, and she intended to arrive there focused and unshaken. Meanwhile, Lisa stood near the kitchenette, watching the scene unfold from a safe distance. She had overheard fragments of the conversation between Kayla and Mark, and her admiration for the jet owner had only grown. Lisa had seen her fair share of entitled passengers and difficult situations, but Kayla's poise and strength were unlike anything she had witnessed before. As she wiped down the counter, Lisa noticed Mark speaking in hushed tones with another crew member near the gate. His body language was tense, his gestures sharp and erratic. Lisa couldn't hear their words, but the uneasy expression on the crew member's face spoke volumes. Lisa's chest tightened. She had a sinking feeling that Mark wasn't done causing trouble. Kayla remained in the lounge, appearing calm and collected to onlookers, but her thoughts churned like a storm. She was acutely aware of Mark's lingering presence and his likely attempt to salvage his bruised ego. Men like him rarely accepted defeat gracefully. Her coffee sat untouched as she tapped out an email to the CEO of the aviation company, detailing the incident with meticulous precision. She refrained from emotional language, focusing instead on the facts, her ownership, Mark's dismissive attitude, and the implications of his behavior. This wasn't just about her. It was about holding people accountable for their actions. As she hit send, a quiet determination settled over her. Mark Baker didn't realize it yet, but the battle he had started would cost him far more than a bruised ego. Justice, she thought, had a way of catching up with those who underestimated the wrong person. The lounge remained hushed as Kayla sat in her chair, her tablet resting untouched on her lap. The coffee on the small table beside her had gone cold, its faint aroma a reminder of how long she had been waiting. Outside, her private jet shimmered under the late morning sun, an emblem of her hard-earned success. But inside the terminal, a storm was brewing. She didn't need to look up to know that Mark Baker was still nearby. She could feel the weight of his resentment lingering in the air, like a low rumble of thunder before the rain. Kayla's patience, while vast, was not infinite. She had given him a chance to correct his course. Now, she was simply waiting to see whether he would take it or dig himself deeper into the pit he had already begun to carve. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen to see a message from Robert. Robert, any updates? Do I need to step in? Kayla tapped a quick reply. Kayla, not yet, but something tells me this isn't over. Stand by. She set the phone down, her gaze drifting toward the window. The jet gleamed against the sky's endless blue expanse, its sleek lines and powerful engines a testament to the achievements that had brought her here. It was hers, and no amount of bias or ignorance would change that. Near the gate, Mark stood with a fellow crew member, his voice low but tense. His colleague, a younger man with a nervous demeanor, kept glancing toward the lounge where Kayla sat. I don't get why you're pushing this, Mark, the younger man said, his voice barely audible over the quiet hum of the terminal. She's got all the paperwork. She's the owner. Mark's jaw tightened, his lips pressed into a thin line. That doesn't mean anything. People forge documents all the time. And do you really think someone like her owns a plane like that? Come on. The younger man hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. But Robert Stone vouched for her. You know who he is, right? If he's backing her. I don't care who's backing her. Mark snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut through the subdued atmosphere. I've been flying private jets for 15 years, and I know the kind of people who own these things. She doesn't fit the profile. The younger man looked away, his unease growing. Maybe it's not about the profile, Mark. Maybe it's about the fact that she earned it. Mark scoffed, his expression hardening. Earned it? Please. Probably inherited it or married into it. Either way, I'm not letting this slide until I get a proper explanation from her. From her position near the kitchenette, Lisa watched the exchange with growing apprehension. She had overheard enough to piece together Mark's intentions, and her stomach churned with unease. It was clear he wasn't going to let the matter drop, and his thinly veiled prejudice was becoming harder to ignore. Lisa glanced toward Kayla, who remained composed and focused, seemingly unaware of the escalating whispers behind her back. The grace with which Kayla had handled herself earlier had left a deep impression on Lisa. She admired the woman's strength and poise, but she also felt a pang of guilt for not stepping in more directly. As a low-ranking staff member, Lisa had limited power, but something about the situation felt bigger than her job. This wasn't just about a disagreement over protocol. It was about respect, fairness, and standing up for what was right. Lisa clenched her hands, her mind racing as she considered her options. Kayla's focus shifted as Mark approached her once again, his steps brisk and his expression taut with barely restrained frustration. She placed her tablet on the table and sat up straighter, her eyes locking onto his with unflinching clarity. Miss Lawson, Mark began, his tone clipped. I've spoken with my crew, and while your documentation seems to be in order, I still have concerns about. Kayla held up a hand, silencing him. Stop, she said firmly, her voice steady but carrying a weight that made Mark falter. We've already had this conversation, Captain Baker. I'm not going to entertain it further. But, no, she interrupted, her tone sharp now. You've made your assumptions, voiced your doubts, and wasted enough of my time. I've been more than patient, but this ends here. Mark's face flushed, but Kayla didn't let him speak. She stood, her presence towering despite her average height. Her gaze bore into him, unwavering. This jet is mine. I earned it through years of hard work, resilience, and determination. And let me remind you, Captain, that you are here to serve as a pilot, not as a gatekeeper to who deserves to fly. Mark opened his mouth, then closed it again, his confidence visibly eroding under Kayla's unwavering stare. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a level that was calm, but undeniably commanding. If you cannot accept that, I'll ensure you're replaced before this flight even begins, she said. And believe me, Captain, your behavior will be documented in full and forwarded to the highest levels of your company. Do you understand me? The color drained from Mark's face. For the first time, he seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation. Yes, ma'am, he muttered, his voice barely audible. Kayla held his gaze for a moment longer, then stepped back, her expression unreadable. Good. Now, I suggest you focus on preparing for takeoff. Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked away, her steps measured and purposeful. Behind her, Mark stood frozen, his bravado shattered and his future in this industry hanging by a thread. Back in her seat, Kayla allowed herself a small breath of relief. She had handled the situation, but the weight of it lingered. These encounters, though familiar, were never easy. They chipped away at something deeper, forcing her to fight battles she shouldn't have to fight. As the minutes passed, Lisa approached quietly, her face pale but determined. Miss Lawson, she said, her voice low, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what happened. You didn't deserve that. Kayla looked up, her expression softening. Thank you, Lisa, she said warmly. But don't apologize for someone else's ignorance. Just promise me one thing. Lisa nodded, her eyes wide. Anything. Never let someone else's prejudice define you, Kayla said. You're worth more than that. Lisa swallowed hard, her admiration for Kayla growing even stronger. I promise. Kayla gave her a small smile, then returned her gaze to the window. The jet was ready, the sky was clear, and justice, as she knew, had a way of finding its mark. All it needed was the right push. Kayla remained seated, her posture relaxed, though her mind remained sharp and alert. The lounge had regained a semblance of its previous quiet. The faint clinking of glasses from the bar and the soft hum of conversation among other passengers filled the air. Yet beneath the surface, a tension still lingered, unspoken but undeniably present. She glanced out the large, floor-to-ceiling window, her gaze settling on the jet she would soon board. The sun reflected off its polished exterior, and for a brief moment, Kayla allowed herself to appreciate the symbolism of it all. This aircraft represented far more than a mode of transportation. It was a testament to her resilience, her ability to rise above the barriers society had placed before her. Every rivet, every wingtip, was a reminder of what she had built and of what no one could take from her. Near the gate, Mark Baker stood apart from the rest of the crew, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. His stance was rigid, his face drawn in a tight frown. Although he had reluctantly conceded the earlier confrontation, the sting of it still burned in him. The younger crew member, who had been standing with him earlier, approached cautiously. "Mark, maybe you should just let this go," he said, his voice low as though afraid of being overheard. Mark's eyes snapped to the younger man, his gaze sharp and filled with anger he hadn't yet voiced. "Let it go," he hissed. "Do you have any idea what this looks like? How it makes me look?" The younger man hesitated, clearly weighing his words. "It makes you look like you're not handling things professionally," he said finally. "Look, I don't know Miss Lawson personally, but everything about her says she's legit. She's not someone you can just dismiss." Mark's lips pressed into a thin line. "It's not about that." The younger man gave him a pointed look. "Isn't it?" Before Mark could respond, a member of the terminal staff approached them, interrupting the exchange. "Captain Baker," the woman said crisply, "the client has requested the final pre-flight checklist. Are you prepared to proceed?" Mark's expression tightened, and for a moment, it seemed he might argue, but after a beat, he gave a curt nod. "Fine," he said, his tone clipped. "I'll handle it." As the staff member walked away, Mark muttered under his breath, the younger man barely catching the words, "She'll get what's coming to her." The younger crew member's eyes widened slightly, but he said nothing, his discomfort evident. Whatever Mark intended, it didn't sound good. Back in the lounge, Kayla's phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Robert, it was an email notification. Opening it, she saw a reply from the CEO of the aviation company. Subject: Incident report. Immediate attention required. Dear Miss Lawson, thank you for bringing this matter to our attention. Please rest assured that we take your concerns seriously. Captain Baker's actions will be thoroughly investigated, and appropriate measures will be taken to ensure this behavior is not repeated. In the meantime, should you encounter any further issues, please do not hesitate to contact me directly. Your satisfaction and comfort are our top priorities. Sincerely, Michael Connors, Chief Executive Officer, Elite Aviation Services. Kayla read the email twice, her lips curving into a faint smile. She appreciated the swift response, but she knew words were only the first step. Actions mattered far more, and she intended to see this through to the end. Minutes later, a terminal attendant approached Kayla, her demeanor polite but slightly nervous. "Miss Lawson," she said, "your jet is ready for boarding. If you'd like, I can escort you to the gate." Kayla nodded, rising from her seat with effortless grace. "Thank you," she said, picking up her carry-on. As they approached the gate, Kayla noticed Mark standing near the jet stairs. His posture was stiff, and his expression stormy. Despite his earlier acquiescence, it was clear he hadn't let the matter rest. Kayla steeled herself, her steps deliberate as she closed the distance between them. "Captain Baker," she said evenly, her voice carrying an air of calm authority, "are we ready to proceed?" Mark's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "The jet is ready," he said curtly. Kayla held his gaze for a moment, then gestured toward the stairs. "After you." Mark hesitated, clearly disliking the notion of being ordered by her, but with no reasonable excuse to delay, he climbed the stairs, his movements stiff and mechanical. Kayla followed, her expression unreadable. Inside the jet, the air was cool and serene, the luxury of the interior a stark contrast to the tension that still simmered between them. Mark disappeared into the cockpit without another word, leaving Kayla to settle into her seat. As the engines roared to life and the jet began its taxi toward the runway, Kayla allowed herself a moment of reflection. She had won this round, of that there was no doubt, but the true victory would come in ensuring that incidents like this didn't happen again, not to her, and not to anyone else who dared to defy the narrow expectations of those like Mark Baker. The jet's wheels lifted off the ground, and Kayla leaned back in her seat, the weight of the confrontation beginning to lift. She wasn't just flying to Geneva for business. She was flying toward a future where prejudice had no place in the skies or anywhere else. As the jet climbed higher, the clouds outside the window seemed to part, revealing an endless expanse of blue. It was a reminder, Kayla thought, of the limitless possibility that awaited those who refused to be bound by others' limitations. And with that thought, she allowed herself to smile, knowing that justice was, as always, just a matter of time. The jet leveled out at cruising altitude, and the hum of the engines became a steady backdrop to the serene luxury of the cabin. Kayla sat near the window, her gaze fixed on the endless expanse of clouds stretching out below. The confrontation with Mark lingered in her mind, not as a source of anger, but as a sharp reminder of the work still to be done. She sipped from the glass of sparkling water provided by the flight attendant, her thoughts shifting between the past and the future. This trip to Geneva was about far more than expanding her company. It was about proving, once again, that she belonged in spaces that many still believed were closed to people like her. Her phone vibrated softly on the armrest beside her, pulling her from her thoughts. The name Robert Stone flashed on the screen. Kayla smiled faintly and answered. "Robert," she greeted him. "I take it you're calling for an update." "Of course," Robert's familiar voice replied, warm and steady. "You know I can't sit still when there's drama brewing." Kayla chuckled softly, her tension easing slightly. "Well, the situation has been addressed for now. We're in the air, and the pilot is no longer an immediate problem." Robert's tone grew serious. "I don't like the sound of 'for now.' What happened?" Kayla recounted the events of the morning, her voice calm but measured. As she detailed Mark's behavior and her confrontation with him, Robert listened intently, his occasional hum of disapproval the only indication of his thoughts. When she finished, Robert exhaled deeply. "You handled that with your usual grace, Kayla, but I can't believe he had the audacity to question you like that. It's infuriating." "It is," Kayla agreed, her tone steady. "But it's also nothing new. You know as well as I do that people like Mark exist in every industry. The important thing is holding them accountable." "And you plan to?" Robert asked, though he already knew the answer. Kayla's gaze shifted out the window, her voice firm. "Absolutely. I've already reported the incident to Elite Aviation's CEO, and I'll follow up to ensure it's not swept under the rug. Mark Baker needs to understand that actions have consequences." Robert chuckled, a note of admiration in his voice. "That's why I've always said you'd make a hell of a lawyer. You don't back down." Kayla smiled faintly. "I fight because I have to, Robert. For myself and for everyone who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong." As the conversation ended and Kayla set her phone aside, the jet's flight attendant, a young man with a professional but slightly nervous demeanor, approached her seat. "Miss Lawson," he said softly, his hands clasped in front of him. "Is there anything I can get for you? More water, perhaps, or a snack?" Kayla looked up at him, her expression softening. She could sense his unease, likely a result of witnessing the earlier tension with Mark. "Thank you," she said, her tone warm. "Water will be fine for now." The attendant nodded quickly and retreated, leaving Kayla to her thoughts. She noted the subtle way he avoided eye contact, the careful politeness in his tone. It wasn't unusual. People often didn't know how to navigate moments of tension, especially when prejudice had played a role. But it saddened her nonetheless. As the attendant returned with a fresh glass of water, Kayla decided to break the silence. "What's your name?" she asked, her voice gentle. He hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering. "It's Jason, ma'am." "Thank you, Jason," Kayla said, taking the glass from him. "And thank you for your professionalism today. I know it hasn't been the easiest morning." Jason blinked, clearly surprised by her acknowledgement. It's part of the job, ma'am," he said, though his voice carried a note of gratitude. Kayla smiled faintly. "It may be part of the job, but it's not always easy to handle situations like this. I just wanted you to know it doesn't go unnoticed." Jason nodded, a hint of relief in his expression. "Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that." As he stepped away, Kayla felt a flicker of hope. Not everyone turned away from injustice. Some, like Jason, navigated it with quiet dignity, even when it wasn't their fight to begin with. In the cockpit, Mark sat rigid in his seat, his hands gripping the controls more tightly than necessary. His mind churned with a mix of frustration and unease. He had flown hundreds of flights, dealt with countless high-profile clients, but none had ever made him feel as cornered as Kayla Lawson. The faint sound of a chime pulled him from his thoughts. It was the intercom, an incoming message from Elite Aviation's headquarters. Mark exchanged a glance with his co-pilot, who raised an eyebrow but said nothing. With a press of a button, Mark accepted the call. The voice on the other end was firm and no-nonsense. "Captain Baker, this is Michael Connors, CEO of Elite Aviation. We've received a formal report regarding your conduct this morning." Mark stiffened, his grip tightening further. "Mr. Connors, I can explain. You'll have the opportunity to explain during a formal inquiry," Connors interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "For now, consider this a direct order. Upon landing in Geneva, you are to report to the local office for an immediate review. Until that time, you are to conduct yourself with the utmost professionalism." Mark swallowed hard, his face pale. "Yes, sir," he muttered. The line went dead, leaving a heavy silence in the cockpit. Mark stared straight ahead, his thoughts racing. The realization of the gravity of his actions began to sink in, and for the first time, he felt the weight of true accountability pressing down on him. Kayla remained in her seat, unaware of the conversation unfolding in the cockpit. She had shifted her focus to the presentation on her tablet, fine-tuning the final details for her meeting in Geneva. The numbers and projections steadied her, grounding her in the tangible results of her efforts, but her mind occasionally drifted, replaying the events of the morning. Mark Baker's behavior had been a reminder of the barriers she still faced, but it had also strengthened her resolve. Every step forward was a victory, not just for herself, but for those who would come after her. The jet hummed softly as it cut through the clouds, carrying her toward a future she had worked tirelessly to build. And as Kayla sat there, a quiet determination settled over her. The battle wasn't over, not yet, but she was ready for whatever came next. The sky outside stretched endlessly, a vast canvas of possibility. Kayla leaned back in her seat, her gaze steady and her spirit unshaken. Justice, she knew, had already begun its work. All she needed to do was stay the course. The descent into Geneva was smooth, the jet gliding effortlessly through the crisp mountain air. The Alps loomed in the distance, their snow-capped peaks stark against the blue sky, a symbol of resilience and permanence. Kayla stared out the window, the breathtaking view a stark contrast to the turbulence of the day. She let the hum of the engine soothe her, but her mind remained sharp, turning over the events of the morning. Justice, she reminded herself, wasn't a single act. It was a process, and she was determined to see it through, not just for herself, but for anyone else who might find themselves in a similar situation. As the wheels touched the tarmac with a faint bump, Kayla felt a sense of closure settle over her, but it wasn't the end, far from it. This was just another step in the journey. The jet taxied to a halt, and the flight attendant, Jason, appeared at her side, his demeanor still professional, but tinged with something softer, admiration perhaps, or gratitude. "Miss Lawson," he said quietly, "welcome to Geneva. It's been a pleasure serving you." Kayla looked up, her expression warm. "Thank you, Jason. Your professionalism hasn't gone unnoticed. Keep it up, you'll go far." Jason smiled, a flicker of pride lighting up his face. "Thank you, ma'am. Safe travels." As she prepared to disembark, Kayla noticed Mark standing near the cockpit door, his expression a mix of stiffness and discomfort. Their eyes met briefly, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, with a slight incline of her head, Kayla broke the silence. "Captain Baker," she said, her tone neutral but firm, "I trust this flight has been a learning experience for you." Mark's jaw tightened, but he nodded slightly. "Yes, ma'am," he said, his voice subdued. Kayla regarded him for a moment longer, then turned and stepped off the jet. The brisk Swiss air greeted her as she descended the stairs, her carry-on in hand. On the tarmac, a sleek black car waited to take her to her meeting, a small reminder of the life she had built through determination and grit. The drive through Geneva was a blend of old-world charm and modern elegance. The cobblestone streets and historic architecture stood alongside sleek office buildings and high-end boutiques. Kayla leaned back in the leather seat, her focus shifting to the task ahead. The meeting was critical, but the events of the day still lingered in her thoughts. When she arrived at the conference center, Robert was waiting for her at the entrance. His broad smile and easy demeanor were a welcome sight. "Kayla," he said, embracing her briefly, "you made it." "Barely," Kayla replied with a wry smile, "but I'm here." Robert's expression grew serious. "I heard from the aviation company CEO. They're taking the incident seriously. Mark Baker won't be flying under their banner for much longer." Kayla nodded, her expression calm but resolute. "Good. It's about accountability, Robert, not just for him, but for anyone who thinks they can treat others as less than." "You're right," Robert said, admiration clear in his voice. "And if anyone can make sure change happens, it's you." The meeting in Geneva was a success. Kayla's presentation captivated the audience, securing the partnership that would expand her company into new markets. But as she left the conference center that evening, her thoughts weren't on profits or growth. They were on the quiet victories of the day. Mark Baker's actions had been a stark reminder of the prejudice that still existed, but the swift response from Elite Aviation and her own unwavering resolve had turned the tide. Justice, she knew, wasn't about retribution. It was about creating change, about ensuring that the next person wouldn't have to fight the same battles. Back in her hotel room, as the lights of Geneva twinkled outside her window, Kayla allowed herself a moment of reflection. The day had been challenging, but it had also been a testament to her strength and determination. She wasn't just flying toward her dreams. She was soaring above the obstacles that tried to hold her back. The phone on the bedside table buzzed with a message from Robert. "Robert, you handled today with your usual brilliance. Proud of you as always. Dinner tomorrow." Kayla smiled, typing a quick reply. "Kayla, thank you, Robert. And yes, dinner sounds perfect." As she set the phone down and prepared to rest, Kayla felt a sense of peace settle over her. The battle wasn't over, but she had won today, and tomorrow, she would keep fighting, not just for herself, but for everyone who deserved to fly as high as their dreams could take them. Weeks later, a memo circulated within Elite Aviation, announcing Mark Baker's dismissal and the implementation of new diversity and sensitivity training for all staff. The incident with Kayla Lawson became a case study, not as a scandal, but as a turning point, a moment when accountability triumphed over complacency. Kayla's story, though private, became an unspoken example within the industry of how resilience and justice could dismantle even the most ingrained prejudices. And for Kayla, it was a reminder that the sky wasn't the limit. It was only the beginning. And so, this story ends with a clear message. Prejudice and ignorance will always face accountability. Kayla's determination not only secured her rightful place, but also sparked a ripple of change, proving that standing up for justice can make a difference. If this story inspired you, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Join us for more powerful stories that challenge stereotypes, highlight resilience, and celebrate justice. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.